I stood at the edge of the battlefield, my heart pounding with adrenaline as the chaos swirled around me. The smell of smoke mixed with the metallic tang of blood hung heavy in the air.
Today was the day.
Today, we would finally strike back against the regime that had oppressed us for so long. Zara, look out. My closest friend, Kian, shouted as a blast of energy whizzed past my head. I barely ducked in time, the ground vibrating beneath my feet from the force of the blast. My heart raced, not from fear, but from the fire of rebellion igniting within me. I raised my weapon, a sleek piece of technology designed for precision. It felt right in my hand, a weight of responsibility I was willing to bear for my people. I glanced at Kian, who was already rallying the others, urging them forward. We were outnumbered, but our spirit was unyielding. Charge! I shouted, leading the charge as we rushed toward the enemy lines. I could see the fear in their eyes as we advanced, a group of determined rebels fighting for our freedom. I thought of my people, those who had suffered in silence while the regime tightened its grip. This was our moment to rise. The battle was fierce. I fought with every ounce of strength I had, weaving between enemies and firing my weapon with precision. I felt invincible, each victory a step toward liberation. But just as I began to feel the tide turning in our favor, I heard a commotion behind me. Zara, we need to fall back, Kian shouted, his voice strained. I turned, only to see several soldiers from the regime advancing on our position, their eyes set on me. Panic surged through my veins. They were targeting me. Get out of here, I yelled at Kian, but he wouldn't leave me behind. We can't lose you. You're our leader. I shook my head, determination coursing through me. We fight together, or not at all. As we battled on, I felt a sharp pain explode in my side. I gasped, glancing down to see a wound seeping crimson. The world around me blurred as I struggled to remain upright. I couldn't give up, not now. I had to keep fighting. But as my vision dimmed, I felt myself being pulled away. The last thing I saw was Kian's frantic face, and then darkness engulfed me. When I opened my eyes, the world around me was a hazy blur. I blinked repeatedly, trying to adjust to the dim light. I was lying on a cold, metal surface, and an unbearable pain radiated from my side. I gasped, the reality of my situation crashing over me like a wave. I was alive but captured. The sounds of the battlefield had faded, replaced by an eerie silence. I struggled to sit up, but pain shot through me, forcing me back down. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized I was alone.
Kian, where was he?
Had he escaped? Flashes of the battle flooded my mind. My comrades fighting valiantly, the rush of adrenaline, and the moment I fell. I'd been so focused on leading the charge, so sure of our victory. Now I felt hollow, the weight of my failure pressing down on me. Suddenly, the heavy door to the room creaked open, and harsh light spilled in. I squinted against the brightness, my heart racing as a figure stepped inside. It was a soldier from the regime, clad in dark armor, a sneer on their face. Well, look who we have here, they mocked, crossing their arms. The great princess of the rebels, lying defeated. How pathetic. I glared at them, my anger igniting a spark of defiance within me. I'm not defeated. I will never surrender. The soldier chuckled, stepping closer. You think your words mean anything now? You've lost, princess. Your little rebellion is crumbling without you. No, I retorted, my voice shaky but resolute. As long as I breathe, hope remains. My people will fight for their freedom, with or without me. The soldier scoffed, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. They advanced, reaching for my restraints. Let's see how long that spirit lasts, shall we? With a swift movement, they yanked me to my feet. Pain shot through my side, but I gritted my teeth, refusing to show weakness. I had to find a way to escape. I couldn't allow them to break me. But the soldier dragged me out of the room and into a dimly lit corridor where I saw other prisoners, fellow rebels, bound and defeated. My heart sank. I had to save them, to save my people, but how could I when I could barely stand? We reached a large chamber filled with guards and technology. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was my chance. If I could create a distraction, maybe I could free the others. Just as I contemplated my plan, the soldier shoved me forward, and I stumbled into the chamber. "Your new home, princess," they sneered. I straightened, taking a deep breath, and then I spotted a control panel nearby, glowing with activity. If I could access it. As I made my way toward it, I felt a surge of hope. I had to believe that I could turn this around. I could feel the fire of rebellion kindling in my heart again. I had to get back to Kian. I had to escape. My fingers brushed against the cold surface of the control panel as I approached it cautiously. The guards were distracted, their voices muffled in my ears as I focused on the glowing buttons and screens. I could almost taste freedom, but I had to act quickly. I pressed my ear against the panel, listening for any indication of what lay beyond. The sounds of footsteps echoed in the distance, but my heart raced with the urgency of the moment. I quickly scanned the panel, searching for anything that could help me. Come on, I muttered under my breath, my hands trembling with determination. I had no training for this, but I'd seen our tech specialists work before. I just needed to create a diversion, something loud enough to draw the guards away. I spotted a blinking red button. Without thinking, I pressed it. A loud alarm blared, piercing the air with its shrill warning. The guards jumped, their faces contorting in confusion and alarm. "What the?" one of them shouted, rushing toward the panel. Now was my chance. I turned and sprinted toward the exit, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the door, I heard shouts behind me. The soldiers were scrambling, the alarm providing the perfect cover for my escape. I burst through the doorway and ran down the corridor, adrenaline propelling me forward. I glanced back, half expecting to see guards hot on my heels, but they were still trying to figure out the source of the alarm. I pressed on, determined to find Kian and the others. I rounded a corner, my feet pounding against the metallic floor, and skidded to a halt as I found myself in a large holding area. Cells lined the walls, and inside each one were my fellow rebels, faces I recognized from our fight for freedom. "Kian," I shouted, my voice echoing in the chamber. I rushed to the nearest cell, finding him sitting on the floor, bruised but alive. Relief flooded through me as I knelt beside the bars. "Zara," he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with hope. "I thought I'd lost you." "Not yet," I replied, trying to catch my breath. "I'm getting you out of here." I set off an alarm. "We have a chance." He grasped the bars, urgency filling his voice. "We need to free everyone. They're keeping the rest of the rebels here." I nodded, determination rising within me. "We will. Just hold on." I moved to the control panel on the wall nearby, frantically pressing buttons, hoping to find a way to unlock the cells. The alarms still blared in the background, and the sounds of guards scrambling grew closer. "Zara, hurry," Kian urged, panic lacing his voice. Finally, I found the right button, and with a press, the cell doors began to slide open one by one. My fellow rebels stumbled out, their faces etched with confusion and fear, but also hope. "Form up," I commanded, my voice steady despite the chaos. "We're getting out of here." The rebels rallied around me, and I felt a rush of pride. Together, we could fight back. I turned to Kian, who was standing at my side, a fierce determination in his eyes. "Let's move," I shouted, leading the charge down the corridor. But just as we reached the main exit, a squad of guards appeared, weapons drawn. They shouted orders, but I felt a surge of adrenaline. We had to push through. We couldn't be stopped now. "Get behind me," I yelled, raising my weapon. The rebels formed a protective line around me, ready to fight. The guards opened fire, and I returned fire, the air crackling with energy blasts. We were outnumbered, but our spirits soared. We were fighting for our freedom, and that made all the difference. The blaring alarms echoed in my ears as we fought our way through the oncoming guards. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, heightening my senses. Each blast of energy I fired was fueled by a singular thought: we would not be captured again. Not today. "Push forward," I shouted, ducking to evade a shot that whizzed by my head. I moved to the side and managed to take out one of the guards, adrenaline giving me an edge as I trained my focus on the others. Kian was at my side, his movements fluid and precise. We had fought together many times before, but this time felt different. Our lives depended on each other, and I could see the determination in his eyes. "Keep moving," he shouted, firing at a group of guards that flanked us. The rebels rallied behind us, a wall of defiance against the regime. Just as we managed to push through the guards, I felt a sharp pain in my side, a reminder of the wound I had sustained earlier. I gritted my teeth, willing myself to ignore it. I had to be strong for my people. "Zara." Kian's voice broke through my thoughts. "We need to find a way out. The main exit is covered." I glanced around the dim corridor, my mind racing. There had to be another way. That was when I spotted an open door at the far end of the hallway. "There!" I shouted, pointing. "That door leads to the maintenance tunnels." We dashed toward it, the sounds of the guards shouting behind us growing louder. I could feel the weight of their pursuit, but the thought of escape propelled me forward. As we reached the door, I flung it open and ushered the rebels inside. The narrow passage was dimly lit, but it was a welcome change from the chaos outside. We squeezed through, Kian leading the way, his expression focused. We hurried through the tunnels, the walls closing in around us. I glanced back at our group, counting heads. Everyone was here, everyone except for the ones we had lost in the fight. A wave of guilt washed over me, but I pushed it aside. We needed to survive first. "Where do we go now?" One of the rebels, a young woman named Mira, asked, her voice trembling. "We need to find the control center for this sector," I replied, trying to sound confident. "If we can disable the alarms and communicate with the rest of our fighters, we might stand a chance." We pressed deeper into the maintenance tunnels, following Kian's lead. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of the chaos above faded into a distant hum. After what felt like an eternity of running, we finally emerged into a small control room filled with screens and blinking lights. "There." I pointed to a console in the center of the room. "We can access the main systems from there." Kian and I moved quickly, my fingers flying over the controls as I searched for the communication systems. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the intercom, sending chills down my spine. "This is Commander Varric. All units are to be on high alert. The princess and her rebels have escaped. I want them found. Now." My heart raced. They were looking for us, and they wouldn't stop until they found us. "Zara, we have to hurry," Kian urged, glancing nervously at the door. "I'm trying," I responded, my mind racing. I finally found the communication system and activated it. "This is Zara of the Rebel Alliance," I shouted into the mic. "We are in the maintenance tunnels, but we need immediate assistance. We are being hunted." I turned to Kian, my heart pounding. If anyone hears this, they need to know we're alive and need backup. A moment of silence passed, and my heart sank. Had I hoped for too much? But then a voice crackled through the static. "Zara, this is Rena.
We hear you.
We're mobilizing a team to your location. Hold tight." Hope surged within me, a flicker in the darkness. "Thank you, Rena. We'll hold our position," I replied, feeling the weight of our situation lift slightly. "Let's set up defenses," Kian suggested, urgency creeping back into his voice. "We need to be ready for when they come." We quickly gathered supplies from the control room, barricading the door and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. As I worked alongside my fellow rebels, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of something monumental, a chance to turn the tide of this war. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the distance, and I could feel the tension in the air. Whatever happened next would define our fate. The heavy footsteps grew louder, and I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. We had fortified the door as best as we could, but the sense of impending confrontation loomed over us like a dark cloud. I exchanged glances with Kian, who was crouched beside me, his weapon ready. "Stay alert," I whispered, my heart racing. "We need to be prepared for anything." As the footsteps neared, I closed my eyes for a brief moment, trying to steady my breathing. I thought of my people, of all we had fought for. We couldn't fail now. Then, with a deafening crash, the door burst open. Guards flooded into the room, blasters raised and ready. I fired instinctively, the energy beams striking one of the guards and sending them sprawling. Kian followed suit, his shots precise and calculated. "Form a line," I shouted, trying to rally the rebels amidst the chaos. "Protect each other." The room erupted into a cacophony of shouts and blaster fire. We fought fiercely, our desperation lending us strength. I could feel the adrenaline surging through me, but as the guards pressed in, I sensed that we were outnumbered. "Zara," Kian called, dodging a blast aimed at me. "We need to fall back." "Not yet," I shouted, determination fueling my voice. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. Not when there was still a chance to escape. Suddenly, through the chaos, I noticed something unusual. A figure stepped into the room, seemingly unfazed by the battle raging around them. It was a soldier, but unlike the others, they wore a different insignia, one I hadn't seen before. "Stop," the soldier commanded, raising a hand. The guards hesitated, glancing at each other in confusion. "Who are you?" I demanded, keeping my weapon trained on the newcomers. "I'm here to help," the soldier said, their voice steady and calm. "I've been sent by Commander Rena. We've been tracking you." The guards looked uncertain, and for a moment, the tension in the room hung thick in the air. I seized the opportunity. "Rena sent you?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Then help us." The soldier nodded, their eyes scanning the room. "We need to get out of here. There's a transport waiting nearby." "Then let's move," Kian shouted, urgency in his voice. The new soldier moved swiftly, leading us toward a back exit. I could feel the heat of battle still raging behind us, but we had to keep pushing forward. My heart raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration propelling me. As we rushed down the dimly lit corridors, I glanced at the soldier leading us. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to catch my breath. "Jalen," they replied, glancing back at me. "I'm a pilot for the Rebel Alliance. Rena wanted to ensure you got out safely." "Thank you." I breathed, relief flooding through me. "We couldn't have done this without you." "We're not out of the woods yet," Jalen warned, their tone serious. "They'll be searching for you. We have to move fast." We rounded a corner, and I felt a wave of adrenaline surge through me. I could almost see the light of freedom ahead. As we reached a small transport ship docked in a hidden bay, Jalen hurried us inside. "Get in. We have to go now." The rest of the rebels piled in, and I followed Kian, taking a seat by the window. My heart raced as I watched the entrance to the bay, half expecting guards to storm in at any moment. Jalen slid into the pilot's seat, their fingers dancing over the controls. "Hold on," they called as the engines roared to life. The ship jolted forward, and I felt the familiar sensation of lifting off the ground. We were leaving the stronghold behind, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Once we were clear of the base, I turned to Jalen. "What's the plan now?" "We need to regroup with the main fleet and assess our losses," they replied, their voice steady. "Then we can strategize our next move." As we flew through the vastness of space, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. We had escaped, but at what cost? I looked around at the faces of my fellow rebels, weary but alive. Kian met my gaze, and I could see the questions in his eyes. "What's next for us?" he asked, his voice low. "We fight," I said firmly, my heart swelling with conviction. "We fight for our freedom and for those we lost. We'll find a way to turn this around." Jalen glanced back at us, a hint of admiration in their eyes. "You've got the spirit of a true leader, Princess." I smiled weakly, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I may have been wounded, but I was far from broken. I had a purpose now, a fire in my heart that would not be extinguished. As the ship hurtled through the cosmos, I stared out into the vast expanse of space, feeling a mix of hope and dread. We had escaped, but the fight was far from over. The weight of our losses hung heavily on my heart, the faces of those who had fallen flashing through my mind. I clenched my fists, vowing that their sacrifices would not be in vain. The hum of the ship's engines filled the silence, and the atmosphere was tense with uncertainty. Kian sat beside me, his brow furrowed in thought. We need to regroup, but we also need to strategize. The regime will be after us, and we can't be caught off guard again. I nodded, knowing he was right. Rena will want to know what happened back there. We have to report everything. Jalen turned in the pilot's seat, glancing at us. We're almost at the rendezvous point. Once we meet with the fleet, we'll have more support. Good, I replied, my heart racing at the thought of reuniting with the rest of our forces. We need to mobilize quickly. The longer we wait, the stronger the regime becomes. As we approached the designated coordinates, I could see the silhouettes of ships against the starry backdrop. Our fleet. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of urgency. Prepare for docking, Jalen instructed, their fingers deftly maneuvering the controls. With a gentle jolt, we landed, and I felt a surge of adrenaline as I glanced at my fellow rebels. Stay sharp. We need to be ready for anything. The moment the ramp lowered, we were met by a wave of familiar faces. Our comrades, weary but unbroken. Rena stepped forward, her expression serious. Zara. Kian, she exclaimed, her eyes scanning us for injuries. Thank the stars you're safe. Barely, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. We need to talk. The regime is aware of our movements, and we lost too many in the last fight. Rena's expression darkened. We've received reports of increased patrols and search parties. We have to act quickly. If they catch wind of your escape, they'll come for us all. I nodded, steeling myself. We need a plan, a way to hit them where it hurts. As we gathered with our fellow rebels, I could see the worry etched on their faces. We had to find a way to lift their spirits, to remind them of what we were fighting for. Listen up, everyone, I called, raising my voice to capture their attention. We've faced unimaginable odds, but we're still here. We've lost friends, but we're not defeated. We are the resistance, and we will fight for our freedom. The murmurs quieted, and I could see flickers of hope igniting in their eyes. We need to regroup, re-strategize, and come back stronger. We've dealt with setbacks before, and we can do it again. But we can't do it alone. We need each other. Kian stepped forward, his voice steady. We've been pushed to the brink, but that's when we're at our strongest. We know our enemy, and we know their weaknesses. Together, we can exploit them. A sense of unity filled the air as we discussed our options. Plans began to form, strategies to strike at the heart of the regime. As the discussions heated up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over me. I would not let fear dictate my actions any longer. Hours passed as we plotted our next move, the mood shifting from despair to determination. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the lingering sense of foreboding. What if our next attack failed? What if we lost more comrades? Just as those thoughts began to spiral, Rena called for attention. We've received word from our scouts. There's a supply depot nearby, an opportunity for us to gather resources and strike a blow against the regime. I nodded, my heart racing at the thought of action. We have to act fast. If we catch them off guard, we can gather supplies and weaken their hold. The rebels rallied around the plan, their spirits lifting as we prepared for the mission. I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me as we armed ourselves and strategized. As we suited up, Kian approached me, his expression serious. Are you ready for this? It's going to be dangerous. I met his gaze, determination flooding my veins. We've come this far, Kian. We can't stop now. For our people, for those we've lost, we fight. He nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. Then let's show them what we're made of. The energy in the room shifted as we prepared to set out for the supply depot. I could feel the anticipation coursing through my fellow rebels, each of us ready to fight for our survival and the freedom of our people. Jalen, now a crucial part of our team, ran through the final details of our plan. We'll split into two groups. One will create a distraction on the perimeter, while the other infiltrates the depot and gathers as many supplies as we can.
Once we're in, we move fast.
We have to be in and out before they realize what's happening. Got it, I said, my heart racing. I glanced at Kian, who was checking his weapon one last time. Ready. Always, he replied, a determined glint in his eyes. As we geared up, I took a moment to breathe deeply, letting the weight of what lay ahead settle over me. We were heading straight into the enemy's territory, risking everything for a chance to strike back. The stakes had never felt higher, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would change everything. Once we were ready, we set out in the darkness of space, our small transport ship maneuvering carefully toward the coordinates of the supply depot. I could feel the tension building in the air as we neared our destination, the sense of urgency palpable among my comrades. Jalen piloted the ship expertly, glancing over at me as we approached. Stay sharp. We need to land out of sight. I nodded, my heart pounding. We'll execute the plan to the letter. No mistakes. As we descended, the landscape of the depot came into view, a sprawling facility surrounded by a perimeter fence and patrolled by guards. My stomach nodded as I took it all in. Time to move, Jalen said, and with that, we landed in a concealed area behind some crates. We filed out, the cool night air brushing against my skin, heightening my senses. Group A, you're with me? I said, nodding to Kian and a few others. We'll head straight for the main entrance. Group B, you know your roles. Create that distraction. As we separated, I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me. We had a mission, and we would accomplish it together. Kian and I moved silently through the shadows, staying low and avoiding the patrols. The layout of the facility was familiar to me. I had seen schematics during our planning sessions. My heart raced as we approached the main entrance, the guards unaware of the impending chaos. On my signal, I whispered to Kian, who nodded, his expression serious. I took a deep breath, steeling myself.
Now.
We sprang into action, darting forward and catching the guards off guard. A few quick shots and they were down, leaving us a clear path into the facility. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow over the supplies stacked high. I felt a sense of urgency as we moved deeper into the depot, scanning the shelves for anything useful. Look for weapons, medical supplies, food, anything we can use. I shouted, my voice echoing in the vast space. As we gathered supplies, I felt a rush of exhilaration. We were doing it. We were striking back against the regime. But just as I was about to grab a crate of medical supplies, the alarms blared, piercing through the silence.
Zara.
We need to go. Kian shouted, urgency flooding his voice. Just a few more seconds. I replied, desperate to gather as much as we could. But as the alarm blared louder, I knew we were running out of time. I grabbed the crate and turned to Kian, who was already looking for an escape route. We need to head for the exit, he urged, his eyes scanning the facility. Just as we turned to run, a group of guards rushed in, weapons drawn. I could feel my heart sink. Cover me, I yelled to Kian, raising my weapon as we took defensive positions. The guards opened fire, and I ducked behind a stack of crates, my pulse racing. We exchanged shots, adrenaline fueling our every move. Zara, we have to fall back, Kian shouted, dodging a blast. I glanced around, searching for an escape. There had to be another way out. This way, I called, sprinting toward a side exit I remembered from the schematics. As we dashed toward it, the guards pressed in, but we pushed through, determination guiding us. Just as we reached the door, I felt a sharp pain in my side. My wound from before had reopened, but I gritted my teeth and kept moving. We burst through the exit and found ourselves in a narrow alleyway behind the facility. Where's Group B? I asked, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Right here. Jalen's voice echoed as the distraction team arrived, a few of them firing back at the guards pursuing us. Get to the ship, I shouted, leading the way as we raced toward our transport. The sound of blaster fire rang out behind us, but we didn't look back. We climbed into the ship, and Jalen fired up the engines. Hold on, Jalen called as we lifted off the ground just as the guards burst into the alleyway. The ship jolted upward, and I looked back at the facility, a mix of triumph and dread swirling within me. We had managed to gather supplies, but at what cost? The regime would not let this go unpunished. As we soared into the stars, I knew we had ignited something. Our resistance was growing stronger, but the fight was far from over. The stars whirred past us as we left the supply depot behind, the adrenaline of our escape still coursing through my veins. I leaned back in my seat, catching my breath, while Kian and Jalen monitored the ship systems, their expressions tense. "We need to get to a safe location," Jalen said, glancing at the radar. "The regime will be on high alert after that." "Agreed," Kian replied, his brow furrowed. "We should lay low for a while and regroup." I nodded, feeling the weight of our recent encounter pressing down on me. We had succeeded in our mission, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running on borrowed time. "Let's head to the safe house on Darius Prime," I suggested, knowing it was one of our more secure locations. "We can regroup and plan our next move." As we navigated through the cosmos, the silence in the ship grew heavy with unspoken thoughts. I glanced at my fellow rebels, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the controls. Each of them had risked everything to fight alongside me, and I felt a surge of gratitude for their unwavering support. "Hey, Zara," Kian said, breaking the silence. "You did well back there." "We all did. We took a significant risk, but we came out stronger." "Yeah, but at what cost?" I replied, my voice tinged with exhaustion. "We need to learn from this. We can't afford to lose any more of our people." Jalen nodded, his expression serious. "We need to change our tactics. If they're hunting us this aggressively, we'll need to be smarter about our moves. We can't keep charging in like we did." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "You're right. We need to adapt. I'll meet with the leaders at the safe house and brainstorm strategies. We need to find a way to disrupt their operations without exposing ourselves." As we approached Darius Prime, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The safe house was our sanctuary, a place where we could regroup and strategize without the immediate threat of capture. Once we landed, we stepped out into the cool air, the familiar surroundings bringing me a sense of comfort. The safe house was nestled within a dense forest, hidden from the prying eyes of the regime. Inside, we were greeted by the sight of familiar faces, rebels who had fought alongside us, weary but ready for action. Rena stepped forward, her expression serious. "Welcome back, everyone. I'm glad to see you all in one piece," she said, her gaze lingering on me. "I heard about the supply run."
You did well.
"Thanks, Rena," I replied, trying to mask my exhaustion. "But we need to talk about our next steps. The regime will retaliate for the attack." We gathered around a large table in the main room, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. I felt the weight of leadership settling on my shoulders, and I knew I had to address the group with clarity and conviction. "Thank you all for coming," I began, looking each of them in the eye. "We faced a significant challenge at the depot, and while we gathered valuable resources, we also drew attention to ourselves. We need to devise a plan that strikes back without exposing our location. Perhaps we could create a diversion somewhere else," suggested Mira, one of the younger rebels. "If we can draw their forces away from our safe house, we might have a chance to gather more intel." "That's a good idea," Kian chimed in. "We can use misinformation to make it seem like we're planning an attack elsewhere." Rena nodded, her eyes brightening with interest. "We have some contacts in the underbelly of the regime. They could help us spread the word." As the ideas flowed around the table, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Our voices united in purpose, the passion for our cause igniting a fire within me. "Let's divide into teams," I proposed. "One group will focus on creating the diversion, while the other gathers intel on the regime's movements. We need to know what they're planning next." The room buzzed with agreement as we began to formulate our plans. The camaraderie among us grew stronger, a bond forged through shared struggles. Just as we were finalizing the details, an alarm blared, echoing through the safe house. My heart sank. "Everyone, stay calm," I shouted, adrenaline flooding my system. "Prepare for a lockdown. We need to get to our positions." As we rushed to our posts, I could feel the tension mounting in the air. The regime had found us sooner than I expected, and we needed to be ready to defend our home. Zara, what's the plan? Kian asked, his eyes searching mine. Hold the perimeter, I replied, my voice steady despite the panic swelling within me. We can't let them breach the safe house. We fight together, just like we always have. With that, we took our positions, weapons ready and hearts pounding. I could hear the sounds of footsteps approaching outside, the unmistakable rhythm of the guards' boots against the ground. Here we go, I muttered under my breath, steeling myself for the fight ahead. The alarm blared like a war drum, the noise punctuating the tension in the air. My heart raced as I took my position near the front entrance of the safe house, my weapon firmly in hand. The rebel fighters around me moved with purpose, each of us fully aware that our sanctuary was under siege. Zara, we've got movement, Kian shouted from the window, his eyes scanning the darkening landscape. I moved closer to him, trying to catch a glimpse of what lay beyond the safety of our walls. Through the trees, I could see shadows flitting between the trunks, guards, armed and ready. The regime had come for us, and there was no way to hide. We have to hold them off as long as we can, I said, my voice steady despite the tremors in my hands. If we can fend them off, we can regroup and counterattack. Agreed, Kian replied, his gaze unwavering. Let's prepare the traps and barricades. We need to slow them down. As we moved to fortify our defenses, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, heightening my senses. The rebels worked together, stacking crates and using whatever materials we had to create makeshift barriers. Everyone, get ready, I called out, my voice rising above the cacophony of alarm bells. They'll be here any second. The sound of boots crunching on the forest floor grew louder, and I could feel the weight of anticipation settling in my stomach. The guards were approaching, and I steeled myself for the impending conflict. Suddenly, the first blaster shot rang out, striking one of the crates we had piled as a barrier. It splintered, sending fragments flying. I ducked instinctively, adrenaline sharpening my focus. Return fire, I yelled, raising my weapon and firing at the advancing guards. Energy beams lit up the night, illuminating the chaos unfolding outside. The rebels rallied around me, returning fire with precision. Each shot fired felt like a testament to our resolve, a declaration that we would not go down without a fight. Kian was beside me, his shots accurate and relentless. We need to create a distraction, he shouted over the noise. If we can pull them away from the entrance, we might have a chance. Right, I agreed, scanning the area for potential escape routes. Let's set off some of the explosives we gathered. It'll create a diversion. On it, Kian nodded, rushing to the back of the safe house. As I continued to fire at the guards, I felt the familiar sting of fear creeping in. What if we couldn't hold them off? What if we lost everything? But just as those thoughts threatened to overwhelm me, I felt a surge of defiance. I was a rebel. I was a warrior. I wouldn't let fear dictate my actions. With Kian working on the explosives, I focused on the guards, trying to keep them at bay. The firefight raged on, the air thick with the smell of blaster fire and the echoes of shouts. Zara, a voice called out, and I turned to see Jalen emerging from the shadows. We need to create a path to the back. The guards are surrounding us. Let's do it, I replied, determination flooding my voice. We'll make a break for it when Kian gives the signal. As we continued to hold our ground, I could see the guards becoming more aggressive, their numbers overwhelming. The barricades we had set up were beginning to give way, and I felt my heart race. Explosives ready, Kian shouted, rushing back to my side. On my count 3, 2, 1, with a deafening boom, the explosives detonated in the back of the safe house, sending a shockwave through the air. Smoke billowed out, momentarily obscuring the guards' view and creating the diversion we needed.
Go.
Move now, I yelled, leading the charge toward the back exit. We barreled through the smoke, adrenaline propelling us forward as we darted into the forest. I could hear the guards shouting behind us, their frustration palpable. Keep moving, Kian urged, his voice filled with urgency. We can't stop. As we sprinted through the trees, I felt a mix of relief and dread. We had escaped the initial wave, but I knew they would regroup and pursue us relentlessly. "Where do we go now?" Jalen asked, his breath coming in quick gasps as we continued to run. "There's a cave nearby," I replied, my mind racing. "It's a good hiding spot, and we can regroup there. We'll figure out our next move." As we reached the cave, I glanced back to see if the guards were following. The sound of their shouts echoed in the distance, a reminder that we weren't safe yet. Once inside, we took a moment to catch our breath, the reality of our situation settling in. We were alive, but the fight was far from over. "We need to plan our next move," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos that had unfolded. "We can't let them get to us again." Kian nodded, determination shining in his eyes. "We'll strike back. We have to show them that we won't be silenced." The other rebels gathered around, their faces weary but resolute. We had survived the siege, but the regime would not stop hunting us. As we began to discuss our next steps, I felt the fire of rebellion igniting within me once again. We would not back down. We would not be defeated. Together, we would forge a path toward our freedom. The cave was dimly lit, the air thick with tension as we gathered around a small, flickering light. My heart raced as I glanced at the faces of my fellow rebels, each one reflecting a mix of fear and determination. We had narrowly escaped the siege, but the threat of the regime loomed larger than ever. "All right, everyone," I began, my voice steady as I addressed the group. "We need to regroup and reassess our strategy. We can't afford another surprise attack like that." Rena stepped forward, her expression serious. "What's our plan? We can't just keep running. We need to take the fight to them." I nodded, appreciating her resolve. "We do need to fight back, but we have to be smarter about it. We can't let them dictate our moves." Kian spoke up, his eyes bright with ideas. "We've gathered intel from our earlier missions. Let's analyze what we know about their movements and operations. We can identify weak points in their defenses." "Good idea," I agreed. "If we can find a way to disrupt their supply lines or communication channels, we can weaken their hold on the territory." As we began to strategize, I felt a surge of energy among my comrades. We were no longer just a group of rebels reacting to the regime's moves. We were a force ready to strike back. "We need to split into smaller teams," I proposed. "One group can focus on reconnaissance, while the other can work on creating distractions and diversions to draw their attention away from us." Rena nodded. "I can take a team to scout the main supply depot. We can gather more intel on their supply routes and see if we can sabotage their shipments." "I'll join you," Kian said, determination etched across his face. "We'll find a way to disrupt their operations from the inside." "Perfect," I replied, feeling a sense of camaraderie. "The rest of us will focus on creating diversions. We need to make them think we're planning an attack somewhere else." As we finalized our plans, the atmosphere shifted. Hope mingled with the uncertainty of what lay ahead, but I could see the fire in my comrades' eyes, the resolve to fight for our freedom and for each other. Once we had our strategies in place, we prepared to move out. The cave had served as our temporary sanctuary, but we knew we had to take action quickly. Time was of the essence. As we split into our respective teams, I couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing on my shoulders. I was leading these brave individuals into danger, and their lives depended on our success. "Stay safe," I said, turning to Kian as we prepared to part ways. "We need you back here in one piece." He smiled, a mix of warmth and determination. "You too, Zara. We'll regroup after the mission." With a final nod, we parted ways, each team taking different paths into the depths of the forest. I felt a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration as we set out to face the challenges ahead. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, but beneath that, I could hear the distant echoes of the regime's presence. They were out there, searching for us, and I was determined to turn the tide in our favor. As we moved through the underbrush, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with tension, and I could sense the weight of our mission pressing down on us. We were headed toward the main supply depot, a key point in the regime's operations. Stick to the shadows, I whispered to my team, a small group of rebels with whom I felt a deep sense of camaraderie. We need to remain unseen. We moved cautiously, staying low and navigating through the trees. The supply depot loomed ahead, its stark structure illuminated by harsh lights. I could see guards patrolling the perimeter, their movements methodical and vigilant. We'll need to create a distraction, I whispered, scanning the area for potential openings. If we can draw the guards away from the main entrance, we might have a chance to slip inside. One of the rebels, a sharpshooter named Nira, raised an eyebrow. I have an idea. I could take out the cameras on the far side. That'll give us a window to move in. Do it, I replied, feeling a rush of adrenaline. We'll cover you. Nira moved silently, her figure blending into the darkness as she made her way to a vantage point. I could see her take aim, her focus unwavering. A moment later, 2 blaster shots rang out, striking the cameras and plunging the area into darkness. Go.
Now,
I urged, leading my team toward the entrance as the guards turned to investigate the disturbance. We slipped through the entrance, adrenaline surging through me. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, the hum of machinery echoing through the halls. Quickly, let's locate the supply room, I said, leading the way down the corridor. The layout of the depot was familiar from our reconnaissance, and I felt a surge of confidence. As we navigated the halls, I couldn't shake the feeling of urgency. Every moment counted, and we had to be quick. There's the supply room. I pointed to a large door at the end of the corridor, relief washing over me. But just as we approached, the sound of footsteps echoed behind us. Quick, lock it, I shouted, and we scrambled to secure the door just as guards rounded the corner. I could hear them shouting as they reached the door, pounding against it in a desperate attempt to break through. We need to move fast, I yelled, scanning the room for supplies. Grab what you can. The rebels moved quickly, filling their packs with anything useful, medical supplies, weapons, food. I kept an eye on the door, my heart racing as I heard the guards outside. Come on, hurry, I urged, adrenaline coursing through me. Just as we were about to finish gathering supplies, the door buckled, and I knew we didn't have much time. Let's go, I shouted, and we rushed toward a back exit I had spotted earlier. We burst through the door just as the guards broke into the supply room, their shouts echoing in our wake. Split up, I yelled, and we darted in different directions, each of us aiming for the cover of the trees outside. I sprinted through the forest, my heart pounding as I felt the adrenaline fueling my every move. The sound of footsteps followed me, but I refused to look back. Zara, I heard a voice call out, and I turned to see Kian running toward me, relief flooding through me. Did you get the intel? I asked breathlessly, my heart racing with excitement and fear. Yeah, we managed to gather some information on their supply routes, he replied, urgency in his voice. But we need to regroup quickly. They'll send reinforcements. We raced through the trees, the sounds of pursuit fading behind us. We needed to reach the safe house before the regime could close in on us again. Once we were clear of the immediate danger, we slowed down, panting and catching our breath. Did everyone make it? Kian asked, glancing back toward the direction we had come. I think so, I replied, my heart still racing. But we need to be careful. They're not going to give up easily. With our packs filled with supplies and intel, we began to make our way back to the safe house, the weight of our success mingling with the knowledge of the danger still ahead. The trek back to the safe house felt both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. We had successfully infiltrated the regime's supply depot, gathering crucial resources and intelligence. But as we moved through the dense forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Do you think they noticed us? Kian asked, glancing over his shoulder. I hope not, I replied, scanning the surroundings for any signs of pursuit. But we should stay on high alert. They won't take our raid lightly. We pressed on, our hearts pounding as we navigated the familiar path to the safe house. Each rustle in the underbrush sent a jolt of anxiety through me, but I forced myself to focus on the mission. As we approached the safe house, A wave of relief washed over me. The familiar structure stood resilient against the encroaching darkness, and I felt a flicker of hope. "Everyone inside," I called out, ushering the group into the safety of the building. Once inside, we quickly locked the door and secured the perimeter. "Did you get what we needed?" Rena asked as we entered the main room, her eyes bright with anticipation. "We did," Kian replied, his expression serious as he opened his pack to reveal the gathered intel. "We found out where their next shipment is headed and how they plan to distribute it." I stepped forward, feeling a sense of responsibility to lead the discussion. "We can use this information to disrupt their operations. If we can intercept the shipment before it reaches its destination, we'll deal a significant blow to their resources." Rena nodded, her face determined. "Let's strategize. We need to be prepared for any retaliation." As we gathered around the table, I felt a sense of camaraderie, a shared purpose that fueled our determination. We began plotting our next steps, meticulously analyzing the regime's supply routes and their expected movements. But just as the atmosphere began to shift toward optimism, a loud bang echoed from the entrance, shattering the fragile sense of security we had built. "Everyone get down," I shouted, instinctively reaching for my weapon. The door swung open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the dim light. My heart raced as I prepared to confront whatever danger lurked beyond.
"Wait."
"It's just us." Jalen's voice broke through the tension, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me as he stepped into the room, panting heavily. "What happened?" I asked, my voice a mix of concern and curiosity. "We ran into a patrol on the way back," Jalen explained, his expression grave. "They're on high alert, searching the area. We barely made it back." "Did they follow you?" Kian asked, worry creeping into his voice. "I don't think so," Jalen replied, his brow furrowed. "But we need to be cautious. They're more aggressive now than ever." I felt a chill run down my spine at the thought of the regime closing in on us. Just then, a familiar face stepped into the room, one I hadn't seen in a long time. "Zara, we need to talk," a voice said, and I turned to see my old mentor, Alara, standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Alara, what are you doing here?" I exclaimed, both surprised and elated to see her. "I heard about the raid and the increase in regime patrols. I came to warn you," she said, her voice low and urgent. "There's a mole among us. Someone is feeding information to the regime." A heavy silence fell over the room, the weight of her words hanging in the air.
"What?"
"Are you sure?" I asked, feeling a surge of disbelief. "I've seen the signs. Guards are moving in patterns that suggest they have inside knowledge. We need to root out the traitor before it's too late," she explained, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of guilt. The atmosphere shifted from one of relief to suspicion, and I could feel tension tightening like a noose around us. "Who do you suspect?" Rena asked, her voice steady, but I could hear the underlying anxiety. Alara shook her head. "I can't say for certain yet, but we need to keep our guard up. Trust no one until we can uncover the truth." My mind raced with possibilities. Who among us could betray our cause? I felt a surge of anger, but I also knew we needed to act carefully. "Let's not jump to conclusions," I said, trying to keep my composure. "We need to watch each other closely and look for any signs of betrayal. If we have a mole, we can't let them compromise our next move." As we began discussing how to gather information and observe each other without creating panic, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me. Trust was the foundation of our rebellion, and now it felt as fragile as glass. The next few days were tense, as we attempted to carry out our plans while keeping an eye on one another. Every whispered conversation felt laden with suspicion, and I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching me wherever I went. I tried to focus on our upcoming mission, intercepting the regime's shipment, but the weight of uncertainty hung over us like a dark cloud. One evening, as I sat in the main room poring over the maps of our target area, I noticed Jalen lingering nearby, his expression contemplative. "Hey," I said, breaking the silence. "You all right?" He nodded but didn't meet my gaze. "Just thinking about everything. The raid, the mole, it's a lot." I know.
But we need to stay focused.
If we can disrupt the shipment, we can strike a blow against the regime, I replied, trying to inject some positivity into the conversation. Yeah, but what if the mole knows our plans? Jalen asked, his brow furrowed with concern. What if they're already working against us? Then we'll adapt, I said firmly. We've faced worse challenges before, and we'll face them again. As we spoke, Kian entered the room, his expression serious. We need to gather everyone. There's something I want to discuss. I exchanged a glance with Jalen, a mix of curiosity and anxiety swirling in my stomach. We gathered the team in the main room, each rebel's face a mix of worry and determination. What's going on, Kian? I asked as everyone settled in. I've been observing the guards' movements, he began, his tone grave. I think I've identified the route they take when transporting supplies, and I believe it's heavily guarded. But if we time it right, we can intercept them at the old bridge, where they're least likely to expect an ambush. Great work, I said, feeling a surge of hope. That gives us a chance to cut off a major supply line. But, Kian continued, I have a bad feeling about this. I've noticed some odd behavior among the team, and I can't shake the feeling that someone is not who they claim to be. My heart sank as I looked around the room. The faces of my comrades, once a source of strength, now felt like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Who do you suspect? Rena asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. I'm not sure yet, Kian replied, glancing at each of us. But I think we need to keep a close watch during the operation. If the mole knows our plan, we could be walking into a trap. The room fell silent as we absorbed his words. I could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on us, but I also felt a flicker of determination. We'll proceed with caution, I said, my voice steady. But we can't let fear dictate our actions. We have to stay united. If we're going to make a stand, we have to do it together. With a shared sense of purpose, we began to finalize our plans for the ambush at the old bridge. Each rebel took on specific roles, ensuring that everyone knew their part in the operation. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling of paranoia creeping in. I made a point to observe each rebel closely, searching for any signs of betrayal. The day of the operation arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation as we made our way to the old bridge. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety coursing through me, the weight of our mission pressing down on my shoulders. Stay sharp, I reminded my team as we took our positions along the overgrown path leading to the bridge. We need to be ready for anything. We concealed ourselves in the foliage, the rustling leaves masking our presence. The sound of the river flowing beneath us was a comforting reminder that we were alive, but it also heightened my awareness of the danger ahead. As we waited, I couldn't help but replay the last few days in my mind. The tension, the uncertainty, the lingering threat of betrayal. I knew I had to keep my focus sharp, but the fear gnawed at the edges of my resolve. Zara, Kian said quietly, his voice low. I can see them approaching.
Get ready.
I nodded, my heart racing as I peered through the trees, spotting the regime's transport vehicle making its way toward the bridge. Guards surrounded it, their weapons at the ready, but I felt a surge of determination welling up within me. On my signal, I whispered to my team, adrenaline coursing through my veins. As the vehicle reached the middle of the bridge, I raised my hand.
Now.
We sprang into action, launching our ambush. Blaster fire erupted around us as we engaged the guards, the sounds of battle echoing in the air. Push forward, I shouted, adrenaline surging as I led my team into the fray. The guards were caught off guard, but they quickly regrouped, retaliating with fierce determination. Focus on the supplies, Kian shouted, maneuvering toward the transport vehicle as I provided cover fire. I could see my comrades fighting bravely, the weight of our mission driving us forward. Just then, I spotted a familiar face among the guards, a rebel I hadn't expected to see. No, it can't be, I muttered, my heart sinking as I realized the truth.
Zara.
Watch out, Kian shouted, but it was too late. The guard turned, aiming straight at me, and I instinctively raised my weapon. But just as I was about to fire, The guard was shot from the side, collapsing to the ground. "Are you okay?" Kian asked, rushing to my side. "I'm fine," I replied, shaken but focused. "But that guard, he's one of us." Kian's eyes widened as he processed the information. "So there really is a mole. We need to finish this and figure out who it is." With renewed determination, we pushed through the chaos, working to take down the remaining guards and secure the supplies. The tide of the battle shifted in our favor as we fought valiantly, each of us aware of the stakes. Once we subdued the last of the guards, we began to gather the supplies from the transport vehicle, relief flooding through me. "We did it!" I exclaimed, a mixture of exhilaration and disbelief. But just as I felt the thrill of victory, a loud crack echoed through the air, followed by the sound of blaster fire. I turned to see one of my comrades, a fierce warrior named Darius, fall to the ground, a look of shock etched across his face. "Darius!" I shouted, rushing to his side. Kian followed closely behind, his expression grim. "We need to get him out of here." But as we worked to stabilize Darius, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping in. The ambush had been successful, but at what cost? The sound of footsteps echoed behind us, and I felt my heart drop as I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a sinister smile on their face. "Well done, rebels. You've played right into my hands." My heart raced as I locked eyes with the figure stepping from the shadows. It was Lyra, a member of our rebellion whom I had always trusted. The sinister smile on her face sent a chill down my spine, and I felt a knot of betrayal twist in my gut. "What are you doing here, Lyra?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions raging within me. "Oh, Zara, you're so naive," she replied, her tone dripping with disdain. "Did you really think you could take down the regime without someone like me in your corner? I've been feeding them information from the start." Kian's face contorted in shock as he stepped protectively in front of me. "You're the mole," he spat, disbelief mingling with anger. "How could you betray us?" Lyra shrugged, her expression almost nonchalant. "You think I would risk everything for a cause that is already lost? The regime offered me power, safety, everything you rebels can't give. I'd rather be on the winning side." "You're a coward," I shot back, the betrayal burning deep. "You could have fought alongside us instead of selling us out." "Fighting is futile," she said with a smirk. "But if you want to play hero, I'll make this easy for you. Surrender now, and I might let you live." "Never," I shouted, gripping my blaster tighter. "We'll fight to the end, even if it means taking you down with us." Just then, Darius groaned beside us, his eyes fluttering open. "What's happening?" he murmured, confusion etched across his face. "Lyra's the mole," Kian said, urgency in his voice. "We need to get you to safety." Lyra laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the chaos of the scene. "You're not going anywhere. I've already alerted the regime. They'll be here any second." I could feel the weight of panic pressing down on me. We had been so close to victory, but now it seemed like everything was slipping away. "Darius, can you walk?" I asked urgently, trying to assess his injuries. He nodded slowly, wincing as he moved. "I'll manage." "Good," I said, my mind racing as I strategized our next steps. "We need to regroup and escape before they arrive." Lyra's laughter rang out again. "You really think you can just walk away? I won't let you. You've caused enough trouble for the regime." "Enough," I shouted, my voice cutting through the tension. "We'll take you down right here, right now." As the confrontation escalated, I felt a surge of adrenaline rush through me. I had faced many battles, but this was different. This was personal. With a swift motion, I aimed my blaster at Lyra. "You're not going to hurt anyone else." But just as I was about to pull the trigger, Darius grabbed my arm, his expression fierce. "Wait, we can't do this here. We need a plan." "Darius, she's the enemy," Kian argued, his eyes blazing with fury. "I know," Darius replied, "but if we're going to fight her, we have to do it smart. We can't let ourselves get caught in a trap." Lyra smirked, sensing the tension between us. "You're all so predictable. While you argue, I'll be the one walking away." Before I could react, she darted toward the edge of the bridge, her movements quick and agile. "Stop her," I shouted, but she was already slipping away into the shadows. Kian rushed after her, but it was too late. Lyra had vanished, leaving us standing on the bridge, the adrenaline of battle still coursing through our veins. "We have to regroup," I insisted, looking at Darius and Kian. "We can't let her get away. She knows our plans, and she'll warn the regime." Darius gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand. "I'm with you. Let's find her and put an end to this." With renewed determination, we made our way back through the forest, retracing our steps to the safe house. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could feel the weight of our failure pressing down on us. Once we reached the safe house, we locked the door behind us, adrenaline still pumping through our veins. The room was filled with an eerie silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "What now?" Rena asked, her eyes wide with concern. "If Lyra's warned the regime, we might be in serious danger." "We have to come up with a new plan," I replied, forcing myself to stay calm. "We can't let her ruin everything we've worked for." As we gathered around the table, the weight of betrayal hung heavily in the air. We began discussing our next moves, but my mind kept drifting back to Lyra's face, the look of betrayal, the chilling smile as she revealed her true allegiance. I knew we needed to be cautious. If Lyra was working with the regime, they would be watching us closely. We had to stay one step ahead, or we would lose everything. "Zara," Kian said, pulling me from my thoughts. "What's our next step?" I took a deep breath, channeling my anger into determination. "We'll regroup and fortify our defenses. We need to lay low until we can figure out our next move." Darius nodded, wincing slightly, but refusing to back down. "And we'll find Lyra. We can't let her slip through our fingers." As we began to strategize, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Despite the betrayal, we were still a team, and we would fight together to reclaim our freedom. Days passed as we fortified the safe house, each member of the rebellion working tirelessly to prepare for what lay ahead. We could feel the tension in the air, a lingering uncertainty that gnawed at us. I spent my nights poring over maps and intel, trying to anticipate the regime's next moves. Each day brought new challenges, and I knew that we needed to remain vigilant. One evening, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the forest, Kian joined me, his expression contemplative. "Thinking about Lyra?" he asked, leaning against the railing beside me. "Yeah," I admitted, sighing as I stared into the distance. "I can't believe she betrayed us. I thought she was one of us." Kian nodded, understanding etched across his face. "It hurts, I know. But we can't dwell on the past. We have to focus on the future." I turned to face him, determination igniting within me. "You're right. We need to find a way to turn this around. We can't let Lyra or the regime win." "Let's regroup with the others and discuss our next steps," Kian suggested, his voice steady. "We need to stay ahead of them." As we made our way back inside, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We were a family, bound together by a shared goal, freedom from the oppressive regime that sought to crush us. Once we gathered around the table, I laid out our plans for the upcoming days. We need to lay low, but also prepare for the worst. Lyra has likely alerted the regime, and we need to be ready for their next move. Rena spoke up, her voice strong. "What about our supply routes? We can't let them cut off our resources." "Agreed," Kian replied, nodding. "We need to find alternative routes and sources of supplies. If we can secure our resources, we'll be better prepared to face them." As we brainstormed strategies, I could feel the tension gradually easing. We were still a team, still committed to our cause, and together, we would find a way to overcome this challenge. But as the days wore on, the threat of the regime loomed larger, and I could sense the calm before the storm settling over us. We needed to act quickly, but with Lyra out there, I knew we had to tread carefully. The days turned into a blur of preparation and strategy as we fortified the safe house and planned for the inevitable confrontation with the regime. I had moments of clarity, punctuated by flashes of doubt, as I considered Lyra's betrayal. "Zara," We need to discuss the intel we gathered from the supply depot, Kian said one evening, breaking me from my thoughts. I nodded, gesturing for everyone to gather around the table. Let's go over what we know. We need to ensure we're on the same page. As we discussed the intel, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease gnawing at me. Lyra's betrayal had exposed cracks in our unity, and I worried that our resolve was beginning to wane. Look, Rena said, tapping the map on the table. If we can intercept their communications, we might learn their plans before they can execute them. That's a solid plan, Kian agreed. But we need to be cautious. Lyra could be monitoring our every move. I felt a surge of frustration at the thought of our trust being shattered by one person's betrayal. Then we'll have to operate in smaller groups. We can't let her know what we're planning. As we began to finalize our plans, a sense of determination washed over me. We were still a team, still fighting for our cause, and I knew we wouldn't back down without a fight. But as the days turned into nights, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. I could feel the storm gathering, the inevitable confrontation looming on the horizon. The battle raged on, each moment a flurry of blaster fire and chaos. I could feel the tide of the fight shifting in our favor, but Lyra's presence loomed over me like a dark shadow. Zara, Kian called, breaking through the noise. We need to regroup. I nodded, adrenaline surging as I fought my way toward him, dodging blaster fire and engaging the guards. The stakes were higher than ever, and I could feel the pressure mounting. As I reached Kian, I felt a surge of determination. We have to find Lyra. We can't let her get away again. Agreed, he replied, his expression fierce. We need to end this now. Together, we pushed through the chaos, our focus narrowed to finding Lyra amidst the battle. The air crackled with tension, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as we fought our way toward her. Suddenly, I spotted her in the distance, her eyes filled with fury as she fired at my comrades. I felt a rush of anger and betrayal. Lyra, I shouted, my voice rising above the noise. This ends now. She turned to face me, her expression darkening. You think you can stop me? You're just a rebel. You don't understand the power I wield. I understand enough. I shot back, raising my blaster. You've betrayed us all, and it's time to pay for that. With a swift motion, I aimed my weapon at her, but she moved quickly, diving for cover behind a stack of crates. Zara, Kian yelled, his voice urgent. We need to focus on the guards. We can't let Lyra distract us. Let her come, I said, my determination unwavering. I won't let her get away again. As the battle raged on, I kept my eyes on Lyra, waiting for the right moment to strike. She was a former ally, a friend turned enemy, and I couldn't let her escape. The chaos around us intensified, blaster fire lighting up the area as we pushed forward. I could feel the heat of the battle, the weight of our mission pressing down on us. Finally, I saw an opening. Lyra emerged from behind the crates, her expression fierce as she aimed at my team. I lunged forward, my instincts taking over. Zara, no, Kian shouted, but it was too late. I tackled Lyra to the ground, our bodies crashing against the dirt as we struggled for control of the blaster. Why, Lyra? I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. Why did you betray us? She grinned, a twisted smile on her face. You're all just pawns in a game. You think you can win against the regime? You're foolish. I felt a surge of rage as I wrestled for control of the blaster, our bodies intertwined in a fierce struggle. We're not pawns. We're fighting for our freedom. With a burst of strength, I managed to disarm her, tossing the blaster aside as I pinned her down. It's over, Lyra. You can't win. As I held her down, I could see the fury in her eyes, the realization that she had lost. You'll regret this, Zara. The regime won't let you live. We'll take our chances, I replied, determination fueling my words. With the battle raging around us, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. This was it, the moment where I reclaimed my freedom and stood against the darkness that had threatened to consume us. The dust of battle settled, and as I stood over Lyra, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me: anger, betrayal, but also a sense of relief. We had fought fiercely, and now we could finally take back our freedom. Kian approached, his expression tense but relieved.
We did it, Zara.
The guards are retreating. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. But at what cost? We lost so many today. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes searching mine. We'll honor their sacrifice. We fought for our freedom, and that matters. With Lyra captured and the regime's forces in disarray, we took a moment to regroup. The safe house was alive with the sounds of victory, but the shadows of loss lingered heavily in the air. As we gathered our wounded, I felt a renewed sense of purpose within me. We had fought against the odds, and while we had endured pain and loss, we were still standing together. Let's move, I said, my voice steady. We need to secure our position and prepare for whatever comes next. This isn't over. As we made our way through the forest, the dawn broke over the horizon, the sun illuminating the path ahead. A new day was beginning, and with it came a glimmer of hope. We'll continue the fight, Kian said, walking beside me. We'll make sure Lyra faces justice for her betrayal. I nodded, feeling the weight of our mission ahead. Together, we'll reclaim our freedom and ensure that our voices are heard. With renewed determination, we pressed forward into the light, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This was our fight, our journey, and we would not back down.